Okay, so we're recording. I'm going to start the presentation. So yeah, this toolkit for the online job search, which, as most of you know, a lot of the job search is online these days. And now that we are almost everyone's quarantined, your job search is almost completely online now. And really, before we get too far down, I want to make sure you have a notebook or pen and pencil nearby, or if you're going to use your computer or smartphone for notes, just make sure you have that ready. Write down notes and questions as you go. It's really easy to forget questions that you have, and you're like at the end, you're like, oh, I had a question I want to get answered. I don't remember it anymore. Yeah, be prepared to ask questions at the end. And some of those things I'll answer during the webinar. Just drop them in the chat. Again, I'm Anne. I'm a product manager. For those of you who are like, what is a product manager? Really what product managers do is kind of a combination of things. Sometimes people say we're like the CEO of the product. However, the difference between a CEO and a product manager is the CEO ultimately has the authority to make decisions, where product managers oftentimes have to influence decisions. We are usually the people who are not just the what and the how something gets built, but why. So we're usually looking for qualitative or quantitative insights to really find where opportunities are in the business. Not just for the sake of building new features for the sake of building new features, but building new features that actually solve a customer problem and are helpful to the business. I'm a public speaker. I've been doing public speaking for about the last 2 years. Have also done talks at Columbia University, University of Montreal, Morgan State University. Online educator. Last summer, I did a online course called Business Applications of Blockchain through O'Reilly Media. Also a product coach and advisor. And so I also work with startups in blockchain and AI. Just because a lot of those people, especially in the very early stages, don't have funds for a product manager. And oftentimes it's one of the founders acting as the product people. And so having somebody for them to bounce ideas off of, better understand, even just setting up basic things like how do you do user research? Like how do you prioritize things? How do you find opportunities? That's, I think, a really big thing. And so I'm currently at Priceline, which is kind of obviously a B2C travel website / marketplace. Being in travel right now is a little interesting considering no one is traveling, but still a lot of really like interesting data patterns and other things that are going on. And there are situations in which people still do have to move around, especially as you think that there are people who are doctors and nurses as well as essential workers, where there are cases in which like they need to rent a car or do other things like that. So it's really interesting being in the travel space right now. Before Priceline, I was in the blockchain space at a legal tech startup called Opala, which is part of Consensus. And that was a lot of fun. It was part of like a big career pivot for me, where I started working a lot more in emerging tech, because for me, I saw that as like a really important opportunity. I was already working in product management, but really kind of knowing that I was going to have experience working with these emerging technologies, I felt like was going to really be good for my career longevity. But in terms of why any of this matters, in terms of like who I've worked with, where I went to school, those kind of things, why does that matter here is because I've actually worked with a lot of these companies and understand from the inside, like how they work, what their goals are, what they value, but then also have applied to some of these companies, so other Fortune 500 companies that aren't listed here, and understand where I went wrong and where I went right, and have worked with, I have a career coach I've been working with since 2014 or 2015. I've worked with negotiation coaches. I have really great mentors. I've done probably near 100 mock interviews in my lifetime, either giving them or getting them. And so there's a lot I've learned, and things where it's like, and not that I get all this perfect every time, but I wanted to share with people. Okay. So again, this is going to kind of go in a flow in terms of kind of from the beginning of the job search towards the end of the job search. And wait, am I sharing my screen? I realize I might not be sharing my screen. 1 second. I realized I did not press share my screen, but we're going to press share. Sorry. Okay. Can everyone see my screen now? Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about that, guys. technology and learning curves. Like I said, I don't do everything right. So back up so you can kind of see the last slide in terms of who I am. I already talked through a lot of this before, but it's, I've worked with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, either through consulting or worked for them directly, and also studied engineering. I know not everybody, necessarily has a technical background working in tech, but for me, I found it really easy and flexible to move around, and it's, I think, helped me be very analytical, not just in my day job, but also my job search. In one moment, I see a thing in the chat. I just want to make sure I got it. Okay, screen is shared. Excellent. I actually can't see my cursor right now, so I don't. Do you guys see the Zoom chat in the screen?
Yep.
You can? Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to exit out of that. Okay, there we go. Because I can't see my cursor. I can only see when it's hovering over there. So I'm having some technological difficulties over here. Okay. So we're gonna go in order of kind of the flow of job search usually goes. I know I got some questions about salary and that kind of thing. Those will be towards the end, just to give people an idea of when those answers may come up in this, if you have other things you need to do today. But we're gonna kind of go through resume and LinkedIn first, because usually when people think, hey, I need to apply for jobs, first thing you do is update your resume. There's kind of like a lot of mistakes people make even just in this phase. There's the searching and applying phase. It's kind of the same phase, but they're two distinct things that you want to make sure you're doing well. And I think one of the big things here is trying to balance of trying to apply for a lot of things, but also applying in a quality way, because you could apply for even more things, but if the quality of your application is not very good because you're not spending time on it, you're not writing cover letters, those kind of things, your chances of getting an interview is not very high. I have several tips for interviewing. We also are going to talk a little bit about interviewing over video, which I have some fun screenshots of me. I did it before and after just to prove a point of like how you show up on video. And then at the end, kind of talking about both your like kind of growing your growth and experience. So this is especially whether you're looking for a job now, or whether it's like you're, just thinking about it. It's really important to continue to do, especially if like you haven't found a job in a while, you think you're gonna be unemployed for a while. It's really important to be able to say, it's not necessarily a gap on my resume, but this is kind of what I did in terms of continuing my self-growth. Your growth is bigger than just what you're doing at your day job, whether you currently have a day job or not. Okay, so this is where I kind of want to get interactive. And actually, because it might be easier for me, I think I said originally I was gonna have you put in the chat. I'm actually, since it's just a small group of us today, if you want to shout it out, it's fine. What do you think the biggest mistakes people make with resumes and LinkedIn are? Just feel to shout it out.
Inconsistencies.
That is a big one. You will send someone your resume and then someone will look you up on LinkedIn and it's a completely different thing. And that's very confusing to people. Does anyone have anything else?
Not tailoring their resume to the job that they're applying for.
Yeah, that is also a really big one. Especially if you're someone where it's like the type of roles that you're applying for are vastly different. That's going to be, that's going to be a big one is like, if for example, if I was applying for product management roles and project management roles, they're somewhat similar and sometimes people will apply for both. But the thing is, using the same resume for both is not, doesn't work out because they're slightly different roles. Any other suggestions here? Okay. So kind of similar to what we just said in terms of not tailoring your resume. So one of the things is not using keywords from similar job postings. So one of the things one of my mentors told me is you need to look at like 10 job postings of things that you would actually want. Like, let's say even if it's a job posting where it's above your level, you want to look at what are those like keywords that repeat the most across all 10 of those listings. And that's going to tell you a lot about how you're going to tailor your resume, even not just to a specific company, but also for, like a lot of product management jobs. use these words. And part of the reason why this is so important is you're never going to get past the automated filters. Usually when people are applying online to a listing, there's not always a human that's reading through all of those resumes. And there's really some sort of automated system that's prioritizing resumes for a human to look at. And if your resume is at the very bottom, because you don't use any of these keywords for those type of jobs, or it's not tailored, like nothing about, and none of the keywords from the job search or the job posting show up in your resume, you're just not going to get past the filters, and you're not even going to have a human look at you. And unfortunately, that is the reality of kind of where we are now with how computers work with the job search. When your resume is seen by a human, they don't really understand how your skills map to the job. Recruiters are looking at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of similar resumes. If they are having to do the work for you of trying to understand how you got from point A to how you're going to get to point B, if what you did at your old company isn't quite what you're going to do moving forward, like they're just going to put it aside. They don't really have time or the energy. And some people just, some you could say, oh, some people just don't want to, but don't make them do the work, because they're just not going to, regardless of how you may feel about that they should be doing the work or not. And then having different content. This was the first one, having different content on your resume than your LinkedIn. Recruiters on LinkedIn won't find you relevant. Let me tell you, LinkedIn is a really great place to be found. I've had recruiters from Facebook, Twitter, Giphy, other Fortune 500 companies find me on LinkedIn and message me and say, hey, I found you on LinkedIn, or like message me directly on LinkedIn. And that's the thing is, having something in your resume and then only applying to jobs with your resume, but then not having that same stuff, with those keywords and everything on your LinkedIn, means that you're basically cutting your job prospects in half. Your LinkedIn is basically your digital resume at this point, and your resume and your LinkedIn need to be consistent. And we kind of talked about, if you're applying for kind of two different roles, you kind of have to decide which of those type of product management versus project management. You have to kind of decide which of those two things you want to be your LinkedIn. But what it shouldn't be is you shouldn't be like missing experience on your LinkedIn. Your LinkedIn shouldn't look like what it looked like when you were applying for jobs 5 years ago. Because I also seen people where they have almost nothing on their LinkedIn. And that's a really big problem. Like I said, you're cutting your prospects in half by not having your LinkedIn up to date. And again, like many of the hiring managers and also people that you're going to interview with are going to look you up on LinkedIn. Some of them will look at your resume, but it's so easy to just look for someone on LinkedIn versus like digging through your email for a resume. That's the thing is like, they might not necessarily, they're supposed to look at your resume, but you can't do anything about it if they end up looking at your LinkedIn instead of the resume the recruiter sent them. So you need to make sure this is up to date and consistent. Does anyone have any questions about this part?
If you're applying to, it's Susie, by the way, if you're applying to a few different roles, how do you decide what your LinkedIn would reflect? Like some sort of common denominator or like a hybrid? Because I find that challenging. There's some roles that are more specific in technology and more roles that are more specific in social impact. And, you kind of have to decide what you want to be in LinkedIn. How do you do that?
LinkedIn, I find it is okay on LinkedIn to have a hybrid of those things. On your regular resume, when you're applying for something with that, it's obviously a little different because it's a little different just because like, you're like, okay, well, I spent the time to put this together and I'm sending this to you as why you should hire me. LinkedIn is, while you can apply to jobs with your LinkedIn, at the same time, jobs are finding you. And so the thing is that I've found that it hasn't really been off-putting, like putting different things on my LinkedIn to kind of convey, because there's things where I don't really put my public speaking on my product manager resume. It might be somewhat related, but it's not kind of like the core principles of what skills I need as a product manager. Do I have it on my LinkedIn in case somebody who wants to like hire me to come speak Yes. And does it confuse people who are looking for product managers? No. I would say like LinkedIn, you have to think of as kind of like a digital, like SEO space for your career. Because when recruiters go into LinkedIn is they have a different view than what you and I have. And basically if they type in, for example, like technical product manager, New York City, LinkedIn basically gives them a prioritized list of people based on relevance. And the recruiters actually don't really know anything about how that relevance algorithm is built, but pretty much it's like Google, where if you're not on the first page, the likelihood that you're going to be seen, or just like the likelihood that you will get reached out to if you're on the first page is a lot higher than if you're on the 8th page. And so I would say LinkedIn is an okay place to have that hybrid to help people find you, and they'll kind of be able to at least filter, like read it and say, oh, I understand her experience here. Okay. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to get, again, like my cursor is invisible for some reason, so I can only see things when I hover over it. So I'm trying to see what's in the chat without, okay. Sorry, if you're in the chat, can you, oh, I might be able to get it. There we go. Oh, okay, oh, sorry, I see you're writing to me. Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, and so other things is like, again, this shouldn't be just you one-sided where you're going to company websites and applying. There's also places you should be posting your resume. So LinkedIn is, I didn't even put LinkedIn on here because that really should just be a default. And different industries, it's going to be different in terms of like what sites you should use for your job search. Go to Google, type in, your type of role, your type of industry, and then type in best sites to job search for that. Because I'm not going to know the best site for every single industry in tech. I find that like Dice and AngelList are really good. A lot of people really like Indeed. I'll say I'm so on Indeed, but a lot of people do like Indeed. There's sites like InterviewJet and Hired where they basically feature specific applicants every week to work with them to find a role. And so those are a little bit more hands-on, and you're actually working with people at InterviewJet or Hired in those scenarios. But basically, if it's 100% you applying to jobs and you're not helping jobs find you, again, it's just like, cutting kind of some of these prospects in half, because you want people to be able to find you. And sometimes it is third-party recruiters and not necessarily the direct recruiters, but depending on kind of, what you're open to, also like how quickly you need a new job, those sort of things, like those will all factor in, and really only you can answer like what is right for you based on your industry and really where you are in your job search. Yes. And in terms of optimizing your job search, like these are things where I say like you should be automating a lot of these things or just doing these things to make your life easier. Definitely use filters. And I say one of the biggest filters that you should really be using is like the time which something was posted. I find like the 2-week window which something was posted is you're much more likely to hear back from a human if a human was actually going to respond to your resume in the first place. I find like sometimes maybe you might get a response if something's been open for a month, but usually at a month period, they've already started interviewing. They're much further along in the interview process. Or like if it's something where it's like something's been open for 3 months, they might be collecting resumes, but there might not actually be an immediate posting. So it might be, depending on if it's a company that you're super interested in, it might be still interesting to try to apply, but you're not necessarily likely to hear back, if it's been open like a month or more in my experience. And then also filtering by relevance of like job title, that kind of thing. Because some of these places will just find like one word, like some of the sites will find one word that seems relevant to you, because it'll say like there's manager, like product manager in my title. So for a really long time, LinkedIn was really bad about figuring out what a product manager was. So it used to recommend all sorts of types of managers, not just project manager jobs, which also project management is different than product management. Pretty much any job that had manager in it, it tried to suggest that I apply to, which obviously doesn't doesn't work for me. So there's a lot of filtering in terms of figuring out how to use their filters to control relevance of that job title. So you're not wasting time day after day, trying to look through things that really are not for you. Job alerts are really important because you can't read every job site every day. And then that's how you get in to be one of the early applicants. So if something is new and was just posted, you can kind of see, oh, what is this? And if it's something you're interested in, you can apply right away, versus being like, oh, I didn't look at this site today or like this week, and now it's been open a week and I'm not one of the first people who applied. And it's okay if you're not one of the first people who applied, but definitely like the earlier you apply, the better. And then help companies find you. Again, this relates to having the right keywords and leveraging LinkedIn and just any of these other sites correctly. Because I know it can definitely be very frustrating when you feel like you're doing all this outreach, all this networking for your job search, and you don't even hear back on your applications. And it feels a lot better, or at least reassuring, when even if you're kind of going through a struggle in your job search, if some companies are at least still reaching out to you to at least say like, hey, we're interested in having a conversation with you, or we're interested in you, or like when we're going to begin hiring again, we would love to kind of talk to you. So definitely don't put yourself in a position where you're having to reach out to all the companies. Have it so that companies also can reach out to you. If they can't find you, or these algorithms are saying that you are not relevant to what they're looking for, they're not going to find you. Okay. So what do you think? I just want people to shout out, like, what do you think the biggest mistakes people make when they're applying for jobs? So this is applying, not even just searching. So this is, you found a job that you think is relevant. You're excited. You're like, oh my God, this job's made for me. Okay. What are the biggest mistakes that people are making when they're applying? You can just shout it out.
Hi, this is Sunita. Maybe like if you're getting a lot of job applications out, you're not really showing the kind of passion you have for that company or that brand, because you're not tying in that deep story of why you want to work at that company.
Yeah, definitely. And that definitely goes back to quality over quantity. And there does become an element if you're like, oh, I need to get a new job soon, where there's definitely this sense of urgency, and you're like, I don't have a whole week to spend on a singular job application, but trying to find that balance of like, how do I show that I'm excited, but also kind of keep it moving so I can also, apply for other things as well. Any other suggestions? No? Okay. So applying cold. So, it's kind of like a cold call. Like if you don't know anyone at that company and you're just applying, not doing any of the legwork to kind of warm up that application. And I'll talk more about what you should be doing in terms of having a warm application. Applying without a cover letter. That's a big no-no. And here's the thing is, I've heard recruiters say both things. I've heard recruiters say, like, the cover letter is dead, I never read them. But I'll say, like, the other half of recruiters I've heard have said, I don't really fully read all the cover letters, but I automatically throw out any application that does not come with one, because they assume like if this person really wants this job, they'll immediately do a cover letter. So that's the thing where it's, it's kind of this thing where it's frustrating because you're like, I'm trying to apply for this job and I want to also apply for other jobs. And a lot of people are saying like frustrated because they don't know what goes in a cover letter or what should go in this cover letter. It's really important. So make sure you're applying with a cover letter. And if you're using AngelList, which doesn't really usually have space for cover letters, you should always apply with like a quick note saying like, hey, Jessica, I saw that you guys are hiring. I'm really interested in B2C e-commerce as well. And notice that you're in a really interesting like wellness space, like would love to talk. So figuring out like how to send like a note that seems much more personal and connects like why, back to what Sunita was saying, why you're excited about this job. And then also the other thing, you say almost identical cover letter to every single job, because in the case somebody actually skims your cover letter, that could be another thing that filters you out if you're just using the same cover letter for every single job. And so how do you have a warm application? So this is not going to work for you every single time, but it's something, especially for something you really want, you need to make sure that you are doing your best to reach out to people who work at the company or have worked at the company. When you apply, use LinkedIn to find the hiring manager or recruiter and reach out. Use online networks to talk to someone who works at the company. There's like LinkedIn, there's a bunch of professional groups on Facebook, professional Slack groups. Kind of say, hey, can you talk to me more about what it's like in this role at this company? And again, the point above where it's like using LinkedIn to find the hiring manager or recruiter, because sometimes you can talk to them directly and kind of say like, hey, I was really interested in this job. I'm curious in learning more. Sometimes they're just not going to respond. That's okay. Do not harass them. That's definitely not going to help, especially now where unfortunately a lot of people have been laid off or furloughed. I'm sure they're getting a lot of people reaching out, but just reach out, try to be warm, because it's better than applying cold, because in the chances that someone does respond, it helps a lot. And again, like using these networks to find people, through Slack groups, like those things, LinkedIn. And then when possible, if you know someone who works there or through these groups, someone like will refer you, definitely get like a referral. Other point we were talking about is cover letter tips. So this is something my husband taught me. So my husband actually volunteers. So my husband's a brand planner, so he doesn't work in career development, but he does volunteer at Baruch College to help college students with their career developments as creatives. And he taught me this for cover letters. And I was like, oh, this actually makes it a lot easier, because the way I used to do my cover letters was like, okay, my name is Anne and this is the job I'm applying for. I would then just go into things about me, about all my experience and why I think it's great for this job. And then I would talk about the company and then I would wrap up. The way he taught me about it, I was like, oh, this actually helps me a lot more in terms of figuring out how to write it. It's like, why are you excited about them? And, you have to figure out like, why should they be excited? Why should they be excited about you if you don't sound excited about them? And this actually, it's great because it helps you do homework that you would need for later in the interview process, where you're going to figure out like, well, like, what are their values? Like, what are things that I would like about them? So you can actually talk about it in this cover letter. And then that actually flows really, really nicely into your experience. Cause now you're like, oh, I've already written about why I like them and what they're doing. And now I can use that to connect to, well, I've done X, Y, and Z, and that connects to, all these reasons I'm already excited for you. And then you want to wrap up. That's like, I think it's a really nice formula for a cover letter. You don't have to do it that way, but I think it's really helpful. And then, okay, so that was kind of like the applying and the interviewing phase. Interviews, the applying and the searching phase. Does anyone have questions before we go into the pre-interview phase? No? Okay. Also, give me one moment. I'm also just going to make sure if we have anyone I don't think we have anyone in the waiting room, but I'm just checking to be sure. 1 second. Again, like my cursor is not behaving today, so give me one moment. I don't think I have anyone in the waiting room, so that's fine. I just signed up for this Zoom Pro account and I know how to use Zoom. I've just never been the admin of my own Zoom account before. So thanks for your patience. So pre-interview, this is really important. This is before you even get an interview. And the reason why this is really important is because a lot of people wait till they get the interview to be like, oh crap, I have to prepare for an interview. But there's a lot of stuff you can do for an interview that's reusable that you should start preparing before, so that if you find out you have an interview in 3 days, you're still applying to other jobs and you're not, rushing to prepare for this interview in just 3 days or like the next day. Make a list of points and experience that you want to highlight during the phone screen. So this really makes you think before you ever get on the phone with someone, like what are things, if you had to give your elevator pitch about who you are, what you do, like the value you bring to companies and what you really like to do, write that down, because having that thought out is going to really help you when you actually have to explain this to a perfect stranger over the phone, which a lot of these kind of first round interviews are still being done via phone screen, even though everybody's using Zoom day to day. And so definitely still kind of be prepared for this to be a phone interview. This beginning part will be similar for a lot of jobs. You're going to be prepared so you're not having to think on your feet. And then the other thing that you can do before you get the interview is like mock interviews. Do mock interviews with your friends in your network. Get comfortable with talking about your experience and like behavioral interview questions that would be pretty consistent regardless of what company it is. Because I don't know if anyone else has had a similar experience, but for me, I know if I haven't interviewed in a really long time, and then on the fly, I'm having to explain my whole professional experience or like highlight the most relevant professional experience to someone who has no idea what I do. And maybe this person's recruited for product managers before, maybe they haven't. How do I explain that to that person? So really kind of getting used to talking about that out loud. And then I would also video record a mock interview. Note how you look and sound. Would you hire you? Do you kind of sound like I'm laying back and I'm not super excited about this role and I'm just talking about bullet points off of my resume? Or do you sound like you're really excited to talk to this person today? You're like, oh my gosh, Jessica, this is so exciting to have you here. You're not maybe going to say that, but like, is that the tone you're giving off? And then also, again, once you do get to a video phase, how you look is going to matter, as well, where everyone knows that people are under a lot of stress. People are now parents and teachers at the same time working from home. There's just a lot people are dealing with, like collective trauma, but at the same time, we're still being, if you're going to interview, you're still being expected to show up and look professional in an interview. So just keep that in mind. So other things you want to prepare that you can prepare ahead of time is prepare a list of questions you would ask an interviewer regardless of the company. You're going to, of course, when you get to an interview stage, you're going to have questions that are company specific, but there's other things that you could ask any company. And this way you're ready to ask these. And really these should be probably based more on your values. And some of these other things would be good for anyone, but really think about what's important to you in a next job. You might be in a phase where you're like, oh my gosh, like literally any paycheck would be great. I don't care. If you're in that phase, at least pretend like you care and figure out like, okay, how would I act if I was someone who, was really like, had more options or wasn't as rushed. And if you're in a position where you're like, I feel calm and collected and that kind of thing, then this is just like a nice like thing for you to be like, okay, cool, I have this as a reference. So things that are nice things to ask are like, how will success be measured for this role? This is usually like more of like a hiring manager question, less of a phone screen question. Like, how does the review cycle work here? Because again, if you're going to work there, you would hopefully, want to succeed through the different review cycles. One of my favorite questions is, what is your favorite thing about working here? Because it tells you a lot. I mean, one of the answers to that question I get a lot is the people. So if you want to qualify that with like, what is one of your favorite things about working here besides the people? Then you can do that. So you can kind of get to more about what type of environment it is, because it does speak a lot to what type of company it is. And then another one for like hiring managers, do you have regular one-on-ones with your managees? Because how you are going to interact with your manager and your manager's kind of communication style is going to be important for your success. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about pre-interview? No? Okay. Okay, we'll keep going. So congrats. Let's say you get to the interview phase. This is exciting. I'm so happy for you. Always look up your interviewers on LinkedIn. Always, always, always. Never go in and be like, I have no idea who this person is, what they've done. And this is really important because sometimes your interviewer is just going to be tired, or they're not going to think to, tell you certain things. I once had an interview, like several years ago, I interviewed at Facebook, and I had an interviewer who started the interview and didn't tell me like anything about what she did at the company. And the thing is, the tricky part about this was Facebook told me I was supposed to interview with someone else. And when the interview started, this person, I had no idea who they were, showed up, and she told me her name, but she didn't tell me what she did. And so, I like really quickly like linked in her while I was like trying to do the interview to figure out who she was based on her name. But these are things where you shouldn't be doing that like during the interview. You should be doing that, before the interview. And it was something where I kind of had to ask her more details about like, okay, well, like, how long have you actually been working at Facebook? Like, what have you done here? And those were all things where I wasn't able to prepare that ahead of time. And like, I'll say a good interviewer will tell you about their, how long they've been at the company, what they do there, but you're not always going to get that. You don't control who interviews you. Always use sites like Glassdoor and Blind to learn more about the interview process, the type of interview questions you're going to get. Definitely like mock interview based on those. That's really, really important. You shouldn't go in like not knowing anything about how the interview process works. Also, you can Google the company name plus role name plus interview to also find what other people have said about those interviews, especially for product management. There's entire books written about product management interviews. And as much as I actually kind of hate that it's kind of like a standardized test for product managers, it's kind of standard in what I do. And so it's something where having that knowledge and knowing how to interview as a product manager is really critical. And so if you're competing against hundreds of other product managers or just other type of roles for that same role, you need to be able to compete in terms of having, understanding what's expected and being kind of at least practiced at interviewing in that style. Again, prepare questions ahead of time specific to this role. And then always, always, always email your interviewer a thank you within like 24 hours of the interview. It really shows that you care, especially since now, like, again, more people are going to be applying for roles. You have to find ways to make yourself stand out and seem like you are excited for this job. Okay, so I know a couple people asked about phone and video interviews. This is really important now because you're not going to do on-site. People are hiring literally over the phone, over Zoom, and then expect people to come into the office once their new role starts. One of the biggest things is, even if you're on a phone interview alone, you need to smile when you talk. And I learned this from a recruiter in, I think, 2010 or 2011. And she said, smile when you talk. And the reason for this is it changes how you sound. You sound a lot more enthusiastic when you talk if you're smiling while you're doing it, versus like if you're really low energy and I'm talking like this. And if you can see my face on Zoom, you can see I'm not smiling anymore, and it changes. While I can still sound authoritative, it sounds more now like I'm lecturing you. Whereas if I'm talking like this and I'm in an interview with you, it sounds like I'm engaged, I'm having a good time in this conversation. That's something where you want to sound enthusiastic about this role. And especially, again, phone screen phase, you have to kind of have a way to set yourself apart because they can't see what you look like. They only have your resume and LinkedIn. So you really want to really help yourself and sound excited, because you could say, I have all the experience in the world, but if you sound like you're bored talking to them, that's going to be a problem. And also, you probably, for those of you who can actually see my video, you probably see I keep drinking water. That's the thing I didn't write here, but you're going to want water nearby because, you're not physically in a room where they can kind of, say, hey, would you like water? So before you start your interview, also make sure you have water, because your mouth is going to get dry talking all the time. And you're going to be in this weird position. You're like, oh, do I tell them I need water and I get up, or do I just, have a dry throat while I'm talking? That's really important. One moment. I'm actually going to take some water now. Okay. Dress up for an interview the same way as if you went into their office. And what I mean by this is you're on camera. Hi. So if you would wear like a collared shirt and a blazer for an interview in their office, wear that on Zoom. Like, I don't care if you're wearing sweatpants or, whatever, but the thing is that from the waist up, this is their experience of what you're going to look like when you show up in the office one day, or that's going to, whether it's conscious or subconscious, that's what you look like to them now. And also signal your interest level, because they might think, well, this person couldn't even put on more than a sweatshirt for this interview. And all these other people are showing up in full suits, that might to them signal interest. And then if you normally wear makeup, I'm not saying if you don't wear makeup to start wearing makeup, but if you normally wear makeup, you can kind of tell a difference on Zoom. Like, you don't maybe have to do like a full face. Like, I don't, like, for example, like I don't ever wear foundation, but I still will wear like mascara and eyeliner on Zoom for things that are important enough. And then also interview in a place with good lighting. And I think this next slide, yeah. So I took this photo I think like an hour before this webinar, like on the left. And so that's me, like no makeup. My hair looks even more crazy than my hair. Like I actually do need to wash it, but I tried to like get it a little more together for this. I'm wearing a t-shirt. You know, so if you're kind of like, I'm going to roll out of bed and show up on Zoom to do a job interview, don't do what's on the left. It looks kind of unprofessional. Like if you see the lighting difference, you know, the lighting's also not great. It's like, you know, there's going to be stuff in the background. Like I think that one, like there's like a bed or whatever. For me, like I know some people have roommates and they're kind of like, I have to do this in a room. For me, I like my living room is actually like a very bright and airy place. I live with my husband, so I'm able to like kick him out for things like this webinar. And so like, you can see like I have plants behind me, that kind of thing. It looks just like the setting, the lighting, and everything else looks a lot better. So if you can't control like those kind of things, and you're like in your bedroom trying to interview, again, just like try to look professional. And if you have like lights you can move around, move the lights around in your room like you would think about you're making like a really low budget movie, and try to make it so the light is hitting your face. So you have to kind of think about you're making an iPhone movie that's really just between you and the interviewer. Because as you can see, even just like the lighting differences in there, you know, I think the person on the right in this photo, it looks like, I'm like, I would hire that person. The person on the left here, like I would kind of be like, I'm kind of like really confused about how they showed up for this. Okay. It was kind of fun for me. I was like, oh, I want to do a visual. So I was kind of excited to show that slide. Okay. So that was kind of the video in phone part of this. And there's the last part of the interview phase. So, you know, if you get to this part where, which is great, where they want to give you an offer, I want to talk, because I know a lot of people talked about, you know, how do I talk about salary, that kind of thing. You know, what do you think the biggest mistakes are in the offer stage? And I'll say there is a recurring theme about what all those mistakes are related to. Does anyone have any ideas?
This is Tolu. I read an article that says that you shouldn't say what your starting price would be, but wait for them to come up with the offer first. But I don't know how one would go about that. The article didn't quite say.
Awesome. So we can talk about that. That is a mistake that people make, and that's actually a mistake people make before the offer phase. So that's actually, it's like, that's usually a mistake where in like the phone screen, actually we'll take like a backtrack and kind of go to, actually we'll go say, congrats, you got the interview. Usually your first phone screen, the recruiter will ask kind of, oh, okay, what's your salary range? And in New York and California, I know totally, like you're in Massachusetts, is my understanding right now. But in New York and California, it's actually illegal for them to ask that, but they usually have to try to figure out, is this person within the budget of this company? And what I've done, which it took me a while to get comfortable asking this directly, because I always felt like someone was going to be like, oh, she seems really too interested in money, we don't want to say it. But I usually will ask this, especially in this phone screen part, if they ask me, I say, what is your range for this role? And they will tell me their range, and I can let them know if that overlaps with my range, or if that is you know, outside of my range. Because there have been times where I've interviewed and I've said, oh, what's your range for this role? And the minimum for their range was actually higher than what I thought my high range was. So that's what puts you at an immediate disadvantage for you to put out a number. So that's why it's really important to ask that, like kind of ask what their range is up front. And especially like, it's not fair for you to have to give a number up front, because especially without having spoken to the hiring managers and that kind of thing, and really understand like, what is the time commitment to this job? Because some jobs are really great at work-life balance. Some jobs are like, expect you to be working every weekend. And in terms of like what you feel like you should be compensated salary-wise for certain expectations, that might vary. And there also may be situations where if specific jobs, you might be like, I'm willing to take a pay cut because of specific experience here, and this field doesn't pay that much. It's really just important, I think, to really understand what their range is, and that sort of thing. And actually one of the other things that I've left out that is not in here before we get back to the offer phase is referrals. Because what you shouldn't do, like I said, we want to automate as much of this process as possible. When you start your interview process, one of the first things you should do is reach out to 3 people that you know would give you a good reference. Hopefully at least one of those people used to be a manager of yours somewhere else. But if not, it's not the end of the world. But it's really like, you should have those references ready to go at the drop of a hat. And you should have that ready way before you get to the offer piece, just because, you know, you really don't want to have to go through this phase where you're not asking someone to be your reference and they're busy and so they don't get back to you for like a week via email, and, you know, leaving that company waiting and having them think that you're not interested, or you don't have people who would readily say good things about you. So you really want to start asking people front, saying like, hey, I'm starting to apply for jobs, da 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 da. Would you be a reference for me, so that you can have their name, their contact information ready to go, and that they know somebody might reach out to them, and you can kind of let them know if you do get to the offer phase of something. You're like, hey, remember when I asked you to be a reference? FYI, company XYZ might be reaching out to you about this. But you want to have those ready to go. And I want to share something because this is a conversation I had last weekend with a friend, where I had a friend where she worked for 7 years for this woman who was running her own company. And she had this great relationship with that woman for the whole 7 years she worked there. And so this woman worked in entertainment, which, as you know, everything's on pause in the entertainment industry because you can't film with people in person, really. You can't, and you really can't do live plays. There's no audience. You can't be on stage with other actors or actresses. And it's a big issue. So the woman who owned the business laid everyone off. And one of the first things that she did was tell everyone who worked for her that they were going to be talking to her lawyer soon. And so my friend was like, I've worked with this woman for 7 years. Who do I even go for a reference? Isn't it going to seem weird that I can't get my boss of 7 years as a reference? And I'm going to say, well, I told her, I was like, what I'm going to tell you is what I tell anyone else, is like, people understand that sometimes people have bad bosses, or people aren't going to ask. You're not going to tell them like, hey, I had a bad boss. But the thing is, people aren't going to say like, why didn't you get a reference from your last boss? As long as like the references you have, you're bringing forward, have good things to say about you, and are, you know, have kind of, you know, people who actually worked with you. And so for her, since she worked in entertainment and she worked kind of managing different artists, like in theater, I was like, you know, for people you have a really good relationship with, there's nothing legally wrong with you kind of reaching out to those people and saying like, hey, I'm interviewing places. we have a really good relationship. I worked really hard for you. Would you mind being a reference for me? And so it's great if one of your 3 references can be someone who used to be your boss. But the thing about asking people to be your reference is that these have to be people you know are going to say good things about you. You don't want to ask someone to be a reference where it's not just, oh, maybe there's a strained relationship. It also could be a situation where you're like, this person maybe really liked me, but I don't know if they'd be the kind of person where suddenly in this reference period, they would say, oh, except for this one thing that person did, which I didn't really like. If you don't really have that kind of trust with that person, I would recommend not asking them for a reference. But that kind of leads up again to this offer stage. But the biggest problem really in the offer stage is not negotiating. So that's kind of related to what you were talking about, Tolu, where it's like, giving that number up front, because it kind of reduces your ability to negotiate. Let's say they call you up and they say, Tolu or Sunita or Susie, I have good news to tell you. We've decided to extend an offer to you. We're going to pay you $180,000 a year annually with medical benefits, And the first thing that you should not say is, great, I accept. Never, ever, 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 ever accept a job offer verbally before you've seen it in writing. And this other important thing about this is there's going to be other documents about specifically what their health coverage covers, what their dental covers, that you need to really have time to review before you accept or decline. So definitely sound excited. Say like, oh my gosh, you know, when I say Jessica is again the recruiter, Jessica, I'm so excited. I'm really, really excited, and I'm gonna take a look through this, and I'll get back to you by day XYZ. You know, and I'll make sure that I share any questions with you. So sound really excited, but then just say, you know, I'm gonna take time to review this. Yeah, because this is again, like you need to kind of go through like what expenses you have. You can maybe ask them for follow-up information about what their benefits cover, especially for examples like my husband's on my health insurance, or there's lots of people where you know, their entire family's on their health insurance, and you'll find some companies don't cover you know, spouses or other people, or like they'll cover them but not at you know, not at the same rate. So these are things where you need to really consider, because there are situations where you could get paid more but be making less because of how the benefits work. So that's something where it's like why negotiation is important. And then at least when you go back and give them like, this is what I'm thinking about in terms of like, okay, salary or equity or other benefits, you have like, oh, here are the reasons why, and not just seeming like you're asking for a random number. Yeah, and then not knowing ahead of time what your bare minimum needs are. You should really do an assessment of like where you were in terms of your current job, or like whatever your last job was, in terms of like what like benefits that you got to make up. Because I have one company I worked for where they had like almost like zero dental coverage, and I said, oh, well, my last place I had this much, and so I counted up you know, how much tax deferred money I saved every year in dental. And how much I saved because I was covered dental wise. And this is how much I'm gonna have to pay for my own dental plan working here. You know, can we make up the difference? So those are kind of things where companies really understand that. But people don't really understand when you're just like asking them for numbers that seem random to them. Does anyone have any questions about this? No? Okay. Okay. And again, this is a really important part. This is really either through the interview process, if you're, or if like, again, you're having like kind of an extended period of unemployment, you know, what they say resume gaps is really, it shouldn't be a developmental or like a growth gap. It should just be like, maybe you're not full-time employed, but you're still doing stuff where it's like take classes in areas where it's like, if you're getting feedback where it's like, we really would love someone with more data analytics experience, or like this kind of thing, you know, or for some, you kind of notice that recurringly the jobs you apply for ask for A/B testing, and that's not something you have. Take online classes in those areas. Make sure to highlight that on your LinkedIn and your resume once you complete those, to really be able to share. If you're in a place where you're like in a tight budget, then, you know, then that's something where you can kind of find free classes for that, or like reach out, use LinkedIn to reach out to people who have that experience and say like, hey, I would like to learn more about this. And I see it in a lot of job postings, and I'm really kind of curious, you know, if you could point me in the direction of resources. Be very specific with your asks, because if people don't know what you're offering, like, or what you're asking for, like they don't know what to offer you, and gain experience. So whether you start a side project, even if it's not for money, or if you're starting a side hustle consultancy, do something that shows you're actively trying to gain experience, learn, because ultimately it's only going to make you stronger and more competitive the longer you're in your job search. As you're upskilling, like, again, like people are busy, I understand. And so you might not have the luxury of time to do this, but especially if you're having like an extended period looking for a job, it definitely helps to show you're continuously learning, gaining experience, like working on things to get that experience where there may be gaps. Okay. Oh, and really importantly, this is kind of something you should be doing overall, is like definitely keep networking online. Join relevant LinkedIn groups. There are so many career Slack groups. You should definitely find them, join them, relevant to your industry and career. You know, there's places where you can kind of say like, hey, I'm looking for opportunities in this area, I'm looking for classes related to this. That's great. There's also private Facebook groups that are similar to those Slack groups as well. There's also like, not listed here, but there's also certain hashtags on Twitter you can follow to look for jobs or career growth resources. And then ask people in these groups if they're interested in mock interviewing as well, because that's a great way to network and also get practice like interviewing with a stranger. It takes, you know, courage to mock interview with someone, but if you can mock interview with a random stranger on the internet, you know, you can mock interview with like recruiters and random hiring managers. Okay. So Q&A time, but also I'm actually doing a class either mid to late April, and it's actually like a course, not like a webinar, that is specifically about the secrets of LinkedIn for job seekers. And where I said, like, I've had Facebook, Twitter, other companies reach out to me, like especially in the last like 3 years using LinkedIn. You know, a lot of people apply to like a Google or a Facebook or those kind of companies and like never hear back. And to have those kind of companies approach you, again, it's not just like great in terms of helping you so you're not having to apply to everything yourself, but it's also good in terms of, you know, in job search, you hear a lot of no's. It helps kind of keep your confidence up while you're going through that process. And so I'm going to kind of share like my secrets and tips that I've used for LinkedIn, like how to properly use these features. You know, also like writing messages, sorry, like some of the formatting got messed up here, but like how to actually get a response from people when you write to them on LinkedIn. There's gonna be some people who, no matter what you do, aren't gonna respond back. But you know, I actually get a lot of messages on LinkedIn myself. And sometimes I'm like, this person looks like they've done a lot in their career, but I have no idea why they're connecting to me. You know, what are they trying to leverage? Or they send messages where I'm like, okay, I don't, there was one where it was from some group in Indiana, and I couldn't tell if what they were doing was like, they want people to consult companies in Indiana, or they want people to move to Indiana and work in those companies in Indiana. Like, that's a big difference. And if you're writing messages to people on LinkedIn and people can't tell what the proposition is, they're just going to ignore you and keep moving. You know, and so it's really kind of an in-depth dive of all the best ways to use LinkedIn for your job search. So you can sign up. There's not, registration's not open, but if you sign up on my website, you know, for classes, then you can kind of see, oh, we have, I think, somebody who just rejoined. If you sign up, then you'll at least get information about registration for that. But so I'm going to open the floor to general questions that people might have that I didn't answer here today. No one has questions? And you can also check to make sure if you're muted, because I think most people probably are muted.
And I do have a question. This is Ivy. I connected with one of my LinkedIn connections a couple of years ago, but never really kept the networking going on. And now that everyone's kind of quarantined, it doesn't have anything to do, I really want to connect with this person again, but I'm not sure like what's the best way to reach out since it's been, you know, over a year and a half. Any thoughts or recommendations on how to bridge that gap?
Yeah. So I would first I would identify, because you said you want to reconnect with them after this time, and I would identify like why specifically you're interested in reconnecting. Whether it's like, I think the things that you're doing are really interested, and I'm interested in getting in that area, and I would like advice for resources. Is it like they work at a specific company and you're like, this is an area I'm interested in getting in, I would just love to hear you talk more about like this company that you work at. Like, I think identifying that for yourself, and then just being transparent, because I find a lot of people you know, appreciate just like the transparency, and like no one really feels like you're coming to come get their job or their stuff. Like, do you, like, in terms of like why you're interested, why specifically are you interested in reconnecting with that person?
Yeah, so this person, we work in the same industry. She is just more of at a senior level. So I'd like to connect to kind of get some more insights on what I should be doing to help build my career so I can get to the level that she's at.
Yeah. Okay. So I've definitely done that before, where I've reached out to people and just like sent them a message like, hey, I've even done this to people I don't know, and said like, hey, and this person, you know, so you can say, hey, you know, I know it's been a while since we connected, and you know, I love seeing your successes and your career and what you're doing. You know, you probably remember I'm in a similar career, and I'm really looking for tips and resources to get to that next senior level. And I, you know, really admire how you've done that. So definitely like kind of give a compliment that's like an authentic compliment, but then also kind of say, you know, the whole thing, you're like, I'm interested in learning like how you got to where you are. And honestly, like people are usually flattered when people ask for that type of help, and just like be like specific about it. And people, if she's a nice person and worth connecting with, like, she's not going to be like, ew. But if you're connected on LinkedIn or you have her email, I would just like frame it like that. And just say like, hey, I'm really not just, oh, I'm just really interested in what you do, but I'm interested in what you do. And then, saying like, I would just love to hear your roadmap of how you got to where you are. Cause when I was kind of like a couple years ago, I actually reached out to random strangers in a product management Facebook group where I said, I'm really interested in learning from people who are like director level and above, product managers who, I just want to hear how you got to where you are, because I don't really hear a lot about how people get to that point in their career. There's a lot of stuff for entry level product managers. There's not a lot that really talks about what should I be doing? What am I missing? And so people actually responded to that. And I had conversations with like 4 different women, and one person was actually a COO. And it was really interesting to hear their different paths. And that gave me a really good insight. And like, they were really open and friendly about it. And I didn't feel like they held, anything back, or they felt like they definitely didn't sound like annoyed that somebody wanted to ask them for help or wanted to hear their story. If anything, people love talking about themselves. So you saying that you want to hear her talk about that is definitely, a good way to get her, to share that information.
Thank you so much. That was a good answer. I'm going to take this and use this to
Awesome.
connect.
Great. I'm definitely hope that goes well. Does anyone have any other questions that they brought that I didn't answer in this presentation?
Yeah, I've got a question. Hi, Anne. This is Sunita.
Hey, Sunita.
Hey, on LinkedIn, I find that a lot of recruiters just want to add you, but they don't really say anything in the comments about, oh, I'm interested in your profile, or I have jobs. What's your opinion on that? Like, should I just be connecting with everybody with recruiter in the job title that friend requests me on LinkedIn?
I would say it's definitely up to the individual. When it comes to recruiters, I do, and specifically because I figure when I post on LinkedIn about what I'm doing and where I am in my career, or whether it's like I'm taking a class, I'm letting people know I'm taking this class, or I'm really interested in this area. It tells recruiters whether or not I've worked with them ever, kind of who I am, what I'm doing. So the thing is like, if they're like, oh, I have a position that is open for this, and this person keeps showing up in my LinkedIn feed, then that's really helpful. Because I'll say recruiters do have 2 views, right? Where it's like, if they're just connecting to your profile like that, they're seeing like the normal view. When they're in like, I'm in recruitment mode and I'm using the LinkedIn recruiter login, like that's the thing where algorithm like basically spits back like results in terms of who's the most relevant for that search. But in terms of like day to day, when they add you on LinkedIn as a connection, they're just seeing like what you see in terms of what people are posting about in their careers. And so I usually will add recruiters. I do get a lot of people who are not recruiters who also try to add me. If I don't really know who they are or what they're doing, a lot of times I won't accept, just because it is supposed to be your network. And if I look at someone's profile and I don't understand how they're going to help my career, or I'm going to help their career, and they didn't leave a note more than the out of the box LinkedIn message about like that says I'd like to connect, then I'll maybe decline. But for recruiters, I usually just always say yes, because I usually don't see the harm in there.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then also the other thing is, sometimes when those people add you, if for some reason, it's hard to kind of, I wish there was like a way to kind of be like, oh wait, there was that recruiter who added me on such and such a date. It'd be really nice to be able to remember. They should do this as a feature. Be able to send a message to recruiters in your network to kind of say like, hey, I'm quietly looking, or like this kind of thing. But it definitely, I think, helps expand. Okay. Any
Great.
other? Yeah.
Oh, I actually have one more question, if I'm not jumping in.
All good. All good.
My question is, you know how some people put in their profiles to stand out? They say, oh, I am a storyteller, a thought leader, a digital ninja, a product ninja, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that works? Or do you think like the more straightforward job description, knowing that job descriptions differ per company. Like, I understand why people are giving themselves creative job titles, but what do you think works best for a product manager or somebody who's working like me in content in a digital space? Like, should I be storyteller or should I just be senior content strategist?
Definitely. So never always be yourself. And for some people, if they really feel like they're a storyteller, good for them. But the thing is like, if yourself is not like, you don't identify with ninja or digital storyteller, and if you're looking at those titles and you're like, I don't even know what that means, trust me that recruiters don't know what that means either. A recruiter is looking for, like, if you're looking at job titles, they're looking for a senior content strategist, or they're looking for a director of content strategy, or there's a lot of things that people might be looking for, that it's just like, I don't like, what is product management ninja mean? And maybe like there's a very niche startup where like they really love calling everyone ninjas, and that's gonna make them really excited. But usually you have somebody who's a recruiter who's never spent a day in their life doing your job, who has looked through millions of resumes of people who do similar things to what you do, and they understand like what a content strategist is. So if you're like, you work for yourself, maybe you can be a digital storyteller. But if people don't know what you are, what you do, from reading your LinkedIn title. And also the other thing goes back to LinkedIn gets a lot of its money from companies that are paying to use it as a tool. So the thing is like, their algorithm is going to look at your title, and it's matching up what your title is to the job that this recruiter has posted. And so that's the thing, is if the job title is not digital storyteller, you're not going to show up as very relevant in there. So that's my answer.
That's great. And I think a lot of the time when I've been updating my LinkedIn profile, I've kind of like forgotten the fact that, this is going to come across dry, but it'll work best for an algorithm or a search engine to scan my page. Whereas, it's not as editorial or exciting as
Yes.
others. So thank you.
Yeah. Let me see.
Hey, Anne, I have a follow-up question on that. This is Sylvia, and sorry if you answered this. I totally missed the entire presentation because I thought it was Central Time.
Okay.
But so how do you discreetly, so say if you're wanting to switch industries or switch positions, our HR has said that they're actively like looking at our LinkedIn profiles, and I know I'm connected with a lot of people at the company. So I've been kind of nervous to, put myself as showing up that I live in a different location if I'm looking to relocate to a different area, or putting a different job description, because I feel like it just kind of opens me up to scrutiny from HR. So what are your suggestions on kind of discreetly making that switch on LinkedIn without completely making yourself obvious to your current employer?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things here, because yours sounds like a very special situation, because I'll say a lot of companies are, they just don't have the bandwidth right now to actively peruse their employees' profiles. So there's a couple things. Definitely. So when you make changes to your LinkedIn, there's like a little toggle switch that says like broadcast to my network versus not. Definitely turn that off. Any kind of things that are like, you don't want it to announce any changes you make to your profile. Definitely make those, if you make changes to your profile, definitely make those recruiters like come to your profile. Like don't give any signals. Like don't let it kind of show up in their news feed or their LinkedIn feed. I don't know if they would look at it if they're just going to your profile weekly to see if you changed anything, but definitely don't broadcast it. Other things that you can do, I don't know if you can do this for people you're not connected to, and I don't know if you would be connected to them. If there's certain people, I don't know how big your company is, but if you know kind of who the people are that work in HR at your company, you can actually block them on LinkedIn. That you can Google like how to block people on LinkedIn so that they actually can't see your LinkedIn, which may trigger something to them. But if they can't find you, if it looks like you don't exist to them, then it's really hard for them to find you. But then also there's things where, because I think there's a way, I don't know if it's LinkedIn Premium only, but to say that you're interested in new job opportunities. So if you're like turning that on, there's also a thing there that says like, hide this from my current employer. So if any of your HR people have that they work at company XYZ, then LinkedIn is gonna like not show them that you have said that you're interested in new opportunities. And then the other thing, actually, one of the biggest things that's really important, even just outside of LinkedIn, is tell your network, like in terms of people that you've worked with, that you might have their email or privately LinkedIn message them and say like, hey, loved when we worked together like 3 years ago at this company. Just FYI, I'm starting to like quietly look. If you hear of anything, let me know. Because one of the reasons why people don't tell you about jobs in their network is because they don't know you're looking. And so there's kind of like a quiet way for you to let other people in your network know without having to like broadcast to the world that you're interested. And then also there's other sites, again, outside of LinkedIn that you can be using, especially in, this Angel List and other things like that. Angel List, I think, also tries to hide from your current company if you say you're looking, because a lot of these companies can't exist if people get fired in the process of using their tools, because people will stop using them. So sorry, I don't know if I answered the whole question. Is there other part where?
Oh, no, that was totally helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other kind of questions that people have? You can feel free to ask me anything.
I have another question.
Okay, great.
So there was a situation where a recruiter actually contacted me about an opportunity. Sounded really great, went through a couple of interview rounds, and then they kind of just disappeared. And like I said, our HR is looking at our LinkedIn, and it turns out that our company was in the process of acquiring that company that interviewed me through the recruiter.
Okay.
So I found out some salary information in terms of what I could be earning, and it's not what I'm earning, but it's what my company would have been willing to pay somebody new. So how can you take that information now that you have it and leverage it, or do you at all?
And this can be I think this can be kind of tricky in these times, because people, people I know are scared of losing their jobs, because, if you lose them, it's there's not as many jobs like for right now. And so most companies are not going to like fire you for like necessarily just bringing it up. But I'll say, like, I have not successfully negotiated from like already being in a role and being like, this is where I need to be making. So I would definitely kind of like look for resources online, for how to approach that, and like what specifically, like to kind of talk to your manager in terms like about like, hey, I've done some market research. You don't have to say specifically to the company, and like noticed in terms of like my level of experience, this is where, people are typically paid. And I'm kind of, and you, whether you're framing it as like, what do I need to do to get from like this point to like point B in terms of like that type of compensation, but if you're also like, this sounds really scary and I don't feel comfortable, I'm scared of losing my job, I was just going to say, like, at this point where things are with like the economy and everything, like I'm not going to recommend you to do things that make you feel unsafe and uncomfortable if you are in a position where you're like, I need to hold on to this job.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, any more questions? I think we may have gotten through everyone's questions. Last call. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining me. I hope this was really helpful. If you took notes or like learned things today, definitely like feel free to share that information with other people, what you learned. And then also like feel free to, on the internet, say like, hey, had a great webinar with Anne. Definitely, because I'm going to be doing more webinars, more classes. So word of mouth is really good. So like one of the best ways that you could thank me is also just again, like sharing online that this was like a really helpful webinar for you. And then again, if you're interested, I'm going to open up registration like middle of this month for this Secrets of LinkedIn for Job Seekers class that I'm working on now. Thank you everyone for coming this afternoon, and I'll also be sending you more information soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.